This is from 8 years ago, but it's a good one. This was the 76th anniversary. I was thinking this.
Another innovation tonight, the national anthem.
Forgot to stop it. Just a second.
God Save the Queen.
YouTube has Moonlight,
which I'm told was done for a service.
As a student at Columbia University in the early 70s, I lived through campus riots in that time. Those were the years of the anti-Vietnam War riots, and I was still around the campuses with the anti-apartheid riots. They weren't even riots, but the demonstrations against South Africa. And for me, it's almost a religious experience watching this generation, these last month or two of riots against Israel, anti-Semitism, because everybody can see the bad. The trick is to see the good. And to me, the good is watching the miracle that the demonstrations against the war in Vietnam worked. And before you knew it, America was out of Vietnam and the communists had sovereignty over all of Vietnam. South Vietnam came to an end. If you've ever seen the musical, if you didn't see the history, Miss Saigon, the famous helicopter scene. America fled, ran out, tails between our legs, just like Afghanistan a few years ago. And we left our allies to be eaten up by Ho Chi Minh and the communists. And riots worked. And the demonstrations against apartheid in South Africa worked. And that was the end of white minority rule and black majority rule. And that's derech hateva, that's the natural course of ways, of events. You have riots, and they reflect an upcoming generation, and the politicians give in some cases for good reason. Maybe it was good to get out of Vietnam. Maybe we should have done it a little bit differently. Maybe we should have never gotten in. I don't want to go into that. And certainly you cannot defend apartheid. But where I see a bracha, and I see great inspiration, is that they can have all the riots in the world, all the demands in the world. Israel's not going anywhere. Israel is not going, the natural events would be like South Vietnam. It would disappear from the maps, just the way all the Arab country maps show it. Natural course of events would be like, that was the end of the Republic of South Africa under white minority rule. Israel's not going to change. If anything, over the course of time, Israel will expand. I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime. I have absolutely no doubt at all that sooner or later the Palestine Authority in Judea Samaria will come to an end, and Israel will extend sovereignty over all of that. Bethlehem, that's where Rachel is buried, Kever Rachel. Shiloh, well, that's our side. Shechem, that's where Joseph is buried. Jericho, I mean, what are we talking about? And to me, there's a great inspiration in seeing how Israel not only faces different rules, anti-Semitism applies different rules to the Jews in Israel from what everybody else faces, but Israel lives by different rules. They cannot take us down. There will not be a third Khurban. There will not be a third catastrophe. And I was just reading today, maybe you did also, even as Biden is holding up weapons, he's informing Congress that he's sending $1 billion worth of weapons, new weapons. They can't stop it. They can't help it because God is protecting Israel. And these students, they picked the wrong ones to start up with. They may be fine on campus, but they cannot bring down Israel. It just can't be because Israel works according to different rules. The laws of physics do not apply to Israel. If they did, Israel would not exist. You've got 7 Arab countries invaded in 1948, a country made up of Holocaust survivors with no weapons. They had no weapons. What the problem is that the American president won't send more weapons? They had no weapons. Harry Truman, the great Harry Truman, he recognized Israel because if he didn't, Stalin was going to anyway, and they were afraid with all the Jewish leftists and Marxists of the labor socialists who were running Israel. There was a real fear that Israel would ally with the Soviet orbit. There really was. That's why Czechoslovakia provided weapons. That's why Stalin voted for Israel. So Truman had to vote for Israel, but when it came time for the 1948 war, he imposed an embargo, much worse than Biden's embargo. Maybe you've heard stories or seen movies where they talk about Jews running guns to Israel in 1940s. Do you know what happened in 1940s? Truman had an embargo. They had no guns. They had no weapons anyway. Well, we're not getting more rockets and more we had nothing. Israel had nothing. So Jewish kids put their futures on the line and they illegally ran guns to Israel. What does that mean? You're running a gun from Manhattan. Where are you going? What, a marathon? You're going to swim across the ocean? How do you think they did it? They did it through New York Harbor and Jersey City. They used guns and they illegally stowed tons of ammunition on the boats. Now, Jews are not typically dock workers. That's just when you're a Jewish boy, from the moment you're born, first thing is the circumcision, and they pay the mohel probably to tell the kid, whisper in his ear when you're cutting, he should be a doctor. Jews are doctors. If they're a little unsuccessful, lawyers, they're complete failures, accountants. Jews don't work in the docks, although Jews are docks. And so what ends up happening is the kids are running guns to Israel, but they've got to get the dock workers to help them. So who ran guns to Israel with them? Who made it possible? 2 groups of people. The Italian mafia, right? Lucky Luciano. The Italian mafia. We had some of our own boys, right? Bugsy Siegel before he got whacked. There was Meyer Lansky. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a wonderful book about the Jews and the mafia in the 20s, 30s, and 40s called, a perfect name, but he was good to his mother. That's the name of the book. But he was good to his mother, about Jews and the mafia. And they were very close with the Italians. And so we help you, you help us. We'll whack some of your people, you'll whack some of ours. And the mafia made sure that their people in the docks helped run the guns to Israel. And the other ones were the Irish, right? The Irish are so anti-Semitic now, it's like the worst country. I don't say this about Irish Americans, but the Irish in Ireland, at that time, the Irish really dominated the docks of Jersey City and Manhattan. And at that time in 1948, their perception was Israel is fighting the British to drive out the British. just as we drove out the British from Ireland. So we want to help you. Look how God does things. Today, the Irish are Israel's worst enemies in Europe. At that moment, now we don't need them. Now we don't need them. Then we needed them on the docks. So God made it that if the good guys wouldn't do it, the mafia and the Irish would do it. And they ran guns to Israel. So Israel lives by different rules. The laws, it's like I'm thinking of that scene in My Cousin Vinny, where Joe, I'm going blank on his last name for a moment. I was about to say Piscopo, was the other Italian guy. With Joe, which one?
Pesci.
There you go. Joe Pesci says, in his cross-examining the guy who makes the grits, and he starts going, what, the laws of physics don't apply to your grits? The whole wide world grits take, I don't know, 6 minutes, but your grits take. The laws of physics don't apply to your grits. The laws of physics don't apply to Israel. She fought 7 Arab countries without weapons, and she won. 1956, Eisenhower also would not back Israel. So Israel was supported by France. People forget, France was Israel's ally in 56. And then in 67, France backed out, and de Gaulle turned on Israel. So she got support then from a little bit from Johnson, but not too much. And therefore, she ended up doing a preemptive strike because she didn't know what to do. And it worked 6 days. The more isolated she was, the better she had it. 73, she decided, Golda Meir decided, they know it's coming, but we don't want to have the world turn on us. So we're going to let them hit first. And we all remember that tragedy. And who came to help? Richard Nixon. Nixon was later caught, shall we say. I don't want to get into Watergate. Forget about Watergate. But Nixon, they found out his presidential tapes. He was taping everything in the White House, including himself. And when they came out with the tapes and the transcripts, he cursed Jews. He didn't like Jews, except for Kissinger. Probably because Jews were not voting for him. But he really didn't like Jews. And of all the people in the whole world, it was Nixon who raced weapons to Israel in 1973. So we don't go by the physics of everybody else. There's political science, there's common allies, there's realpolitik. Israel is a whole different word. You don't know. And so I find great inspiration, and I'll find more next year and the year after if I'm still alive. Otherwise, you'll do it for me. And great inspiration that for all the campus riots, they can't take Israel down. They can't take it down. She'll only be stronger. More Jews will come. Do you know there's now 9.9 million Jews in Israel and Arabs, population 9.9 million. In another 5 years, I think they said even next year, what am I talking? Next year, the population will be over 10 million. It's unbelievable. 80% Jewish. They predicted that with the Arab birth rate of like 8, 9 kids an Arab and Jews having a low birth rate, that after about 10, 20 years, the Arabs will end up outnumbering the Jews in Israel. What ended up happening? Never happened. The laws of physics didn't apply. Nobody counted. Okay, so the Arabs are having more kids than Jews, but nobody counted on the blessed communists persecuting Jews so bad that 100,000 Jews had to come in to bolster the Jewish population. Overnight, we ended up with a higher percentage of Jews vis-a-vis Arabs than before. And what now has happened is that Arab women are getting college educations, and they're getting access to television, and they're not having kids the way they used to. So that now, and no one has done a better job than Yoram Ettinger, former ambassador, who has done demographic studies showing Israel now has more kids within Israel per family than an Arab family. We're growing compared to the Arabs, even without immigration, but we still get immigration. Putin attacks Ukraine, we get more Jews from Ukraine, get some non-Jews also. In the meantime, you get Russians out, Russian Jews, because they're afraid what happens because Zelensky's Jew. The whole thing's crazy. The laws of physics don't apply to Jews and to Israel. And so that's the inspiration. So let them yell and let them scream. It's not good. But there's one more thing about it. I'm going to write about it as soon as I figure out how I can write it in a way that it doesn't come back to bite me. But with our class, I can be honest. This is a bracha. Let me tell you something. In the old days, a Jew could go to Columbia University or any of these universities, get a good education, and come out a Jew. When I went from 1971 to 76, it already was changing. Jews were starting to give up their Judaism. When I was a freshman in 71, there were 12 boys with yarmulkes. Kids who went to the yeshiva high school, they graduated from yeshiva high school I went to, and from the other yeshiva high schools. There was BTA and Highley and Yeshiva Flatbush and Ramaz and Elizabeth and YCQ. When I graduated college, there were only two of us, another guy and I, were the only two of the 12 still wearing yarmulkes. I remember I went to one of Joe, what happened to you? Well, I met a girl. And little by little, they gave up their yarmulkes. The girls were still, the Jewish girls from the yeshivas were still holding it. The yarmulke is a big thing because immediately it impacts how you behave and how people treat you, not out of anti-Semitism, but a girl is not going to try to get you to go to bed with her if she sees you wearing a yarmulke. If she's religious and she likes you, she'll try to get you to marry her. But believe me, they don't come to you and they don't get started with people with yarmulkes. And so with Jewish girls, they don't feel the same religious pressure to assimilate. Not that they would do improper things, but they didn't have the same pressure to assimilate. By the 80s and by the 90s, the assimilation rate had become absolutely horrendous. And Jewish religious kids from modern Orthodox homes around the country, going to the great universities, parents were spending $20,000 a year for the kid to go to yeshiva from first grade to eighth grade, 4 years of high school, 12 years at $20,200. It's like $250,000 plus all their passion. The single most important thing to a Jewish parent, religious parent, is the kid should grow up religious. And the kid leaves home for college, and the kid is religious, and it's the fulfillment of all your dreams. And you say to yourself, it was worth the $250,000. And they come back 4 years later, no yarmulke, no Shabbos, no kashrus, they've given it all up. And not necessarily for another girl or another boy, they've just given it all up. The assimilation on campus is such that long before this year's craziness, people were coming to me as a rabbi saying, I don't know what to get, I don't know where to send my kids. Rav, I don't know where to send my kids. They just finished high school, they're nice religious kids. I'm terrified. Everyone I know who sent their kids to this college, that college, the kids came back non-religious and lost. I don't know what to do. I want the kids to have a competitive edge in the workplace and expanded minds and greater opportunity. I want to give them that, but I don't want them to get to lose what's most important. I don't know what to do. I was asked this constantly, and I don't even know what the answer is. I mean, you could say go to Yeshiva University, and that's nice, or Touro College, Stern College, okay. But a lot of people, I went to Columbia, and there was something about the Ivy League experience. There was something about those professors, the ones committed to teaching and not to rabble rousing. There really was. And being in a classroom with people who didn't shoot spitballs and didn't make nonsense, but who were there just to do their, and did their readings and came to class, and they didn't buy Spark Notes or Cliff Notes, but every week they would read 6 books as assigned. There was something about that. And what do I tell parents? I don't know what to say, because it's more important your kid come out religious after college than that your kid become a genius and give it all up and olam haba, the world to come. I don't know what to tell them. I tell them Yeshiva University. I tell them maybe go to Israel, Bar Ilan University, Hebrew University overseas program. It's a real problem. That's a bracha. I got to figure out how to put this in writing. So as I said, it doesn't come back to bite me. But I'm telling you, this is a blessing. This crap that's going on those campuses now is a blessing. They're taking Jewish kids who don't even know it, but they were going to be coming to assimilate and give up everything. And they're telling those kids, you're Jewish. You're Jewish, and you will never, ever be able to get rid of that. And if you think you're coming into intersectional university where you're going to be one more black and Hispanic and gay and Muslim and Arab, you're Jewish, and you can't fool us, and you'll always be Jewish, and you'll always have that mark on you. So you may as well take it and get used to it, because you're Jewish. And I'm telling you, this is a great bracha. I'd love to see the statistics 10 years from now, comparing this year's Jewish kids, how much they hold to religion 10 years from now, compared to those from the 1990s. There's a Gemara that says that Haman of Purim brought more Jews back to Judaism than Mordechai. There's nothing like the threat of being destroyed to bring you back home. So that's a little bit on Yom HaAtzma'ut and a little bit about the campuses and about the laws of physics don't apply to the state of Israel. And let's learn, because we have a lot to cover and never have enough time, even when I don't go on a soliloquy. So here we go. Let's first of all take this off. All right, let's just do this. Okay. First, I have to give it a little bit of a start for a moment. Then I can take that down. Then we can take this out of the way, and we get rolling. Where we left off last time was with the death of Avner. Avner, you will recall, was the chief of staff of Ish Boshet, the House of Saul, and on his way back from King David, having told David that he now is fully in alliance with him, and having brought Michal, David's wife, back from the House of Saul, he encounters Yoav, David's chief of staff. And Yoav has a matter to settle with Avner. Avner had killed Yoav's brother Asael, who had pursued Avner after that historically tragic incident where Avner said, "Let the boys play." That time that the 10 or 20 soldiers of Avner and Yoav were at the spring, and Avner said, "Why don't they play with each other? Play fight." And it turned into a disaster with 20 Jews killing each other. And then Asael was pursuing Avner, and Avner said, please back off. I'll end up killing you. And Asael wouldn't stop, and Avner ends up thrusting a sword and a spear and killing him. And he got him right. He got him right in the worst possible spot, right in the gut, in the spot that would kill him. And he didn't want that. There was a miracle actually from God, which we'll learn more tonight. It was God's miracle that Avner, that despite trying not to kill Asael, actually ended up killing him. And it was permitted. He was doing it in self-defense. Okay. So Avner was on his way, and we learned that Yoav encountered him, and Yoav killed him. That it said Yoav left David, sent messengers after Avner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. Mibor ha-Sirah. Bor is like a pit. Sirah is like a spring. But David knew nothing about it. When Avner returned to Hebron, Yoav took him aside within the get to talk to him privately, to talk to him discreetly. There he struck him in the belly in exactly, the rabbis tell us, exactly the same spot. Did he pierce Avner as Avner had pierced his brother Asael? Thus Avner died for shedding the blood of Asael, Yoav's brother. Of course, I'm in English, not Hebrew. I just want to quickly refresh where we left off. Afterward, when David heard of this, he declared, my kingdom and I are forever innocent of shedding the innocent blood of Avner. And you'll recall David went into mourning, and he wouldn't eat until nightfall, and he tore his garment, and he led the entourage following Avner's funeral, his casket. We talked about that the king never follows the casket according to Jewish law. It's beneath the king's unique dignity. But David broke with dignity and halacha to follow that casket so the whole nation would know he truly was in mourning. Okay. And he put a curse on Avner, an imprecation. May the guilt fall upon the head of, on Avner, on Yoav. May the guilt fall upon the head of Yoav and all his father's household, and so on and so forth. Yoav and his brother Abishai had killed Avner because he killed their brother Asael. And David ordered that everybody, including Yoav, who did the killing, murder, and everyone, tear their clothes the way it's done at a Jewish cemetery and wear sackcloth and mourn. and David walked behind the bier. And they buried Avner at Hebron. And the king wept aloud by Avner's grave. And he wrote a kina, a dirge. And the whole nation saw he wouldn't eat while it was still day. And the nation saw. And everybody saw, all Israel knew, it was not by the king's will that Avner, son of Ner, was killed. He had hoped to unify the country and take the monarchy in a blessed show of unity. And now the chief of staff of the House of Saul, who in unity was coming over and openly even bringing Michal with the approval of Ish Boshet, now it was all risking the possibility of a civil war. And so David never forgot. Today I am weak, even though appointed king, but those men of Tzruya, the sons of Tzruya, Avner and his brothers, they're too savage, and they'll pay for this. And we went through that more. Let's continue learning about this. This is from Masechet Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, folio 20a. This is the halacha that it's a Mishnah, that the king does not follow the funeral bier. And when I say the word bier again, it's an unusual word in English, B-I-E-R. Met lo met, eno yotze mipetach palperin shelo. If there's a death, even of a relative, it is not appropriate for the king of Israel, about whom we've learned so much about his status and honor and dignity during our Thursday night classes, as we've been learning about the laws of ethics of war and the role of the king and his unique status. It is not appropriate for the king to follow the funeral bier. Rabbi Yehuda Omer imrotze letzet achar hamita yotze. Rabbi Yehuda offers a tweak on this Mishnah, saying that if the king wants to go after the coffin, he may. Well, it's not a coffin. They don't bury in a coffin. They bury in shrouds. Mita means like a bed. In other words, again, the bier, I was trying to avoid this unusual word that sounds like other words in English. But if he wants to follow, he follows. Sheken matzinu b'David, she'atza achar mitato shel Avner. Because this is exactly what we just saw in what we're learning right now. V'hamelech David olech achar hamita. That David the king followed the bier. And it was explained, Aleph Lamed Amar Le. It was responded to Rabbi Yehuda. That was an exception. David's action was not to establish a practice for all time that Israel kings may follow the bier. It was a one-time exception, lo haya davar elo fayes ha'am. It was only for the purpose of calming down the nation and promoting peace and unity within the country. And likewise, when he does sit shiva, he doesn't follow the bier, but he does sit shiva at home in the palace. And likewise, if he's sitting on the floor, everyone sits on the floor. And the Gemara goes on in Sanhedrin 49a. That's Memtet Amud Aleph, or folio 49, side 8. Every page of the Talmud is a page number, a folio, and it's either A or B, the front side or the back side of the page, which we call a folio. They use that word. Sanhedrin 49a, we just learned this also. Vayetze Yoav me'im David vayishlach malachim acharei Avner vayashivu otam mibar hasira. So we learned that Yoav, upon hearing that Avner had just seen David, now was coming back whistling a happy tune, and it persuaded David that he has gone over to David's side and is bringing the House of Saul with him. It says that Yoav did not trust it. He felt that Avner was a fifth columnist and a traitor, and he was taking advantage of David's naivete and just natural goodwill. And it says that it had something to do that he went from Bor Hasira, and the Gemara asks, my Bor Hasira, what does that mean? And I'm going to read it in English to get the full flavor of it, because we're now going to get into the rabbinic understanding of why God allowed it that Avner died. That is to say, we don't know why people died. We really don't. It's very, very risky business for a rabbi, anyone to whom God does not speak as a Navi, a prophet of God. It is very, very risky business for someone to presume to make an announcement. Here's why the following thing happened. Jerry Falwell, a great friend of the late Jerry Falwell, who was a great friend of Israel, founder of the Liberty University and was a big guy among the Protestants, formed the moral majority, was an important factor in electing Ronald Reagan. After 9/11, when the Saudi Arabian Muslims took down the Twin Towers, Jerry Falwell said this is because of America being lax on abortion. That's dangerous stuff. How do you know? That is dangerous stuff. You're against abortion. You believe it's a sin. You believe it's murder. All right. That's your theology. Okay. But to go ahead and say definitively, because Americans have killed X number of fetuses after Roe v. Wade, that's why God brought down the Twin Towers. That's heavy stuff. You don't know that. I had a better theory. My theory was it's because America was treating Saudi Arabia like our friend, and we brought in these animals to study flying airplanes, and we allowed them to be absent the day that class studied how to land the plane. So afterwards they said, we were wondering, they took the course in how to fly an airplane, but they never took the class on how to land. We were wondering about that. And meantime, Clinton had an advisor who, because of taking care of privacy rights, put into place all these rules that prevented the FBI and CIA from communicating with each other. And so to the degree that the FBI knew stuff and the CIA knew stuff, they weren't allowed, after this all came out, they changed the rule. From now on, they're allowed to communicate again. So that was my theory. It had nothing to do with abortion. Maybe it had something to do with stupid politics. It's very dangerous to start saying, I know why a bad thing happened. So we don't have that authority. Sometimes very righteous people die at young ages. Cancer, we don't know why. God knows why. And sometimes very evil people live long lives. Every so often, the head of a mafia family dies in his 80s. How did they live a whole lifetime like that? We don't know. Evil people that live in their 80s, 90s, we don't know. Righteous people, everybody. My father was a tzaddik of a guy. He died of leukemia at age 45. I don't know why. There were righteous people who died during the Holocaust. There were evil people who survived the Holocaust. I don't know why. Nobody knows why. Prophet of God knows why. But you have to be a real prophet. Most of us, we haven't had one of those for about 2,000 to 3,000 years. Now, the rabbis of the Talmud, though, often in the Gemara, we often find that when there's something biblical, not 9/11, not Pearl Harbor, but biblical, they often sit and say, why did this biblical event take place during an era of prophecy? There may have been a reason, and we're not sure what the reason is. And we're going to learn now. The rabbis of the Talmud debate, and there are at least 5 different theories of what the sin of Avner was that resulted in God having him get killed. And the very fact that there are 5 or 6 different opinions shows even there no one's sure. We don't know. Maybe it's the obvious, that he was making peace with David, and Yoav didn't. Yoav was angry that he killed his brother. Or maybe Yoav was concerned that he'll become the new chief of staff and I'll go down a notch. Who knows? Even the rabbis don't have one singular explanation. Here's why Avner was killed. So let's have that in context and understanding as we now learn the rabbinic opinions why God allowed for Avner to die prematurely, as it were. Okay. Gemara, Sanhedrin Daf Memtet Amud Aleph, 49a. The verse states, and Yoav went out from David and sent messengers after Avner, and they brought him back from the Bor Sirah. And I read that to you just a little while ago. Gemara says, what is the meaning of the name Bor Sirah? Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, a boar, a well, and a thorn, the sirah, caused Avner to be killed. He was killed because of a well and because of a thorn. What does that mean? Well, first we have to refresh our memories a bit. I'm not going to take the time to go back in the text. I'll just say it briefly, and hopefully it will prod your memory. Remember the time that Saul, Melech Shaul, was pursuing David to kill him? David was running for his life. And David was deep inside a cave, and Saul happened to go to the same cave for the purpose of relieving himself. Number one. And while he was relieving himself, David surreptitiously crawled in and cut a little piece of Saul's garment, of his royal robe. Saul finished relieving himself, went back to wherever, and when he was a safe enough distance away, David called out to him, Saul, my father. And Saul, yes, my son. What is it, my son? And David says, I don't want to hurt you. Here you are treating me like I'm just a dog. I'm just a dog, Your Honor. I'm, Your Majesty, I'm just a little dog. What am I? I don't want to hurt you. I love you. And you're pursuing me. I want to show you I could have killed you. Look at this piece of garment that I cut from your robe. Look at your robe. I don't know, on the left side. I don't know, right side. Look at your robe. That's this piece of garment. That's how close I was with a knife. I could have killed you. I didn't do so. I just did it so I could show you. And Saul said, oh my God, I realize it. I've been wrong. I've been at fault. You're my son. The midrash is that Avner, the chief of staff of Saul, said, I don't believe he cut that garment. I say you were walking to the cave to relieve yourself, and you passed a thorn, and the thorn tore off a piece of your garment. And later, I say David found that piece of garment, and he's lying, and now he's telling you he could have cut it off. He cut it off, he could have killed you. Not true. I say it was a thorn. Do you remember the other of the two instances? Saul is pursuing David. He's again going after David after all of that. This time they're asleep in the middle of the night, the whole encampment. And David surreptitiously sneaks in with one or two others. And they take the king's canteen, his water canteen. And then they go back to a safe distance and they go, Saul, yes, what is it, my son? And David says, your chief of staff, Avner, he failed to protect you. I was able to walk in there. I got so close to you, I took your canteen. The midrash is that Avner said, that's not your canteen. He got that from a spring, a well of water. And because Avner did not allow Saul completely to internalize how David twice could have killed him, but spared him because he loved him. And twice Avner instead tried to persuade Saul. He's full of baloney. He could have killed you. A thorn is what tore your garment. He's got a spring of water. That's where he got his water. There are those who say either one or both of those two factors are why God ultimately took Avner's life through the intermediary of Yoav. Let's read the text. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the name Bor Sirah? Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, a well and a thorn, because Avner would be killed. Avner became liable to be killed when he failed to take advantage of two opportunities to bring about a reconciliation between King Saul and David. First, when David cut off a corner of Saul's robe after he entered a cave in order to relieve himself. And second, when David found Saul sleeping and took the jug of water and the spear from next to his head. Rather than tell Saul that David could have killed him and refrained from doing so, Avner suggested to Saul that his robe may have been torn by a thorn bush and that his jug of water may have been taken by one of his own men. These two incidents are alluded to by the words bor, well, jug of water, and thorn bush. Let's go forward more. We were reading Also in the same Sanhedrin, same folio, Vayatehu Yoav el toch hashar ledaber ito b'shali. And Yoav pulled over Avner now. Avner was leaving David, going back home to Benjamin, the House of Saul, to let him know that Michal's been deposited safely with David, and I have turned over to David. Yoav finds out and gets Avner to come his way and pulls him aside to talk to him, ostensibly like just to whisper in private, but actually to get him close enough so he could murder him unexpectedly. Umar Rabbi Yochanan Shadanu Din Sanhedrin. Let's read this in English for speed and such right now. Rabbi Yochanan says, Yoav judged Avner according to the Jewish court law, the halakha of the Sanhedrin, which would sit in judgment by the gates of the city. How so? Yoav said to Avner, what is the reason that you killed my brother Asael? This isn't private. This is just the two of them, hunched over, talking softly. Avner said to him, Asael was pursuing me with the intention to kill me. And therefore, he had the halakhic legal status of a pursuer. If someone comes to kill you, the Torah says kill him first. He had the status of a pursuer, whom I had the right to kill in self-defense. And Yoav said to Avner, you could have saved yourself from being killed by my brother if you simply would have struck one of his limbs. You could have wounded one of his limbs. Could have gone for his arm, his leg. Avner said, I couldn't aim carefully. I wasn't able to do so. I was running away at the same time. He was faster than I am. Remember, he was the swiftest of men, Asael. So I was running as fast as I could. So I had to swing my spear while I've got my back to him, turning around for a moment, and I could not aim with precision. Yoav said to him, oh, now seeing that you were able to aim and hit him precisely in the fifth rib. Remember how we said at the beginning of class, I reminded you, this was God's miracle leading up to this moment. God by miracle made it that when Avner almost wildly was swinging behind himself with the spear, just trying to really not kill Asael, just get him out of there. God made it by miracle that the spear pierced Asael right in that fifth rib, where like the kidney and the liver are. Killed him instantly. And Yoav says, oh, you weren't aiming, huh? Huh? You weren't aiming, but you got him precisely in the fifth rib. Could you not have successfully aimed at one of his limbs? And therefore, Yoav was determined, I'm going to get you in that same exact spot. The Gemara says, what is the meaning of the term to speak with him quietly, in confidence, privately? Rav Yehuda says that Rav says you're always supposed to quote the rabbinic source. If it's not your idea, but you learned it from some other rabbi, you're supposed to quote that source. He took him aside to speak to him by way of deception. As for what is stated, Avner smote him with the butt of the end of this in the Chumash. He hit him in the fifth rib, the place where the gallbladder and liver hang. And that is what happened to him. And so we now see, as we go forward more into understanding what happened. Omar, this is from Vayikra Rabbah, the midrash. It's in Leviticus, and they're talking about other subjects, and now they go off that topic a bit to a sort of, let's say, non sequitur. It began originally talking about other things to do with purity and impurity and things that were going on in Leviticus, but and certain kinds of other factors. And as a segue, they get into the discussion of what was the reason that God allowed that Avner died. Avner, Loma Neharag. Avner, why is it that he was killed? Omar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yehoshua, the son of Levi, says, Avner Neharag, al sha'asa daman shel na'arim schok. The reason God allowed Avner to be killed comparatively prematurely, is that he had committed a grave sin when he made a joke watching all the soldiers of David in the House of Saul and said, let them play fight, let them fool around in kibbutz. He made a joke out of it, and it ended up getting out of control, and they ended up killing each other because he was the instigator who incited all that death, and that led to all kinds of internecine strife. That's the reason he died, according to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Hadahu dechtiv, vayomer Avner el Yoav yakumu naharim v'sachakulu fanenu. Maybe you remember this. We had learned it in verse 12. We had learned it in chapter 3. Excuse me. We had learned it in verse 14, I guess. You may remember Yoav and the soldiers of David came out. Where Avner and Ner and the soldiers of Ish Boshet, son of Saul, they were at Gibeon, and Yoav, son of Tzruya, and the soldiers of David also came out to Gibeon. They confronted one another at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat on one side of the pool, the other group on the other side of the pool. Avner said to Yoav, let the young men come forward and sport before us. Let them play fight, sechok, lisachek, to play, mischak, a game. Let's make a game out of it. So let them play. Vayomer Yoav yakumu. Yoav said, all right. And you know what happened from there. To save time, we won't read it all, but you know what happened. By the way, you notice whenever I try to highlight what I'm reading, it automatically kicks open the side panel. But it's very important for some of you to get that highlighting of the text, since it is in Hebrew and all of that. Okay. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says the reason Avner was killed, that God allowed that to happen, is because he was responsible singularly for that terrible tragedy of all those Jewish soldiers killing each other. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, different rabbi, says, no, that's not the reason he died. The reason God arranged that Avner died before his time, so to speak, Al Shehikdim Shmo L'Shem David. We learned this before, last week and even before that when he wrote a missive to David, he improperly addressed David by placing his own name before David. He wrote from Avner to David instead of writing to David from Avner. We've learned before about how careful we must be when we speak and when we talk, and even when we talk informally, when we are talking to someone who has religious significance, we have to be careful. We don't call him by, frankly, you're not supposed to call your father by his first name or your mother by her first name. Frankly, until about 20, 30 years ago, we didn't even call the neighbor by his first name. When I was a boy, and Morty Bresnik, our next door neighbor, it was some occasion, the two families got together, and I asked the question, Mr. Bresnik, and he said to me, don't call me Mr. Bresnik. Don't be so formal. Call me Morty. My father, Zichron Levracha, said to me softly, keep calling him Mr. Bresnik. He's not Morty to you. And from what my father, Zichron Levracha, taught me, I taught that to my son, Aharon. Here in Los Angeles, everybody's informal. Everything is informal. Don't call me Mr. This, Miss This. Call me whatever. I've taught my children, you call him Mr. This, Mr. Jones, Miss Smith. Even if you're the only one, that's how we talk. And so it was a sin, according to Rav Shimon ben Lakish, that he referred his own name before David's. He should have said to David from Avner. Instead, he wrote from Avner to David. Okay. Let's see. Maybe that's not the reason. That's just one opinion. Okay. V'hachi katav le me Avner le David. He wrote from Avner to David. There's another opinion that rejects that idea. For that, he died. On the one hand, maybe he was great enough. The greater you are, the higher the standard you're held to. If you're Moshe Rabbeinu and you do something that would not even be a sin practically for an average person, you might lose the chance to go to Eretz Yisrael. Whereas for the average person, we don't even know what Moshe Rabbeinu's sin was. Rashi said it's that he hit the rock. There are a lot of other opinions. There are certain opinions that say it couldn't possibly be the sin. And they show why. God told him to bring his mateh, his staff, with him. And previously, he had brought water to the Jews by hitting a rock at God's command. But whatever that was, that it was sin, he was kept from coming to Eretz Israel because he was on such a high level. So maybe that's the sin of Avner. On that, but others say, no, that couldn't be the reason to die. For Rabbanan Amru, so the rabbis, other rabbis say, Al Yadei Shahayalu Shaul Lehitpayes B'David V'Lo Hinicho Avner. And this is what we just learned. What we just learned a few moments ago, that he had the authority and the power and the influence as King Saul's chief of staff to bring extraordinary peace and comity between David and Saul. And instead, he lost the chance when he told Saul, your garment probably got torn by a thorn. And as far as the canteen, he's probably got a well. And then there's other rabbinic opinions. V'yesh omrim, there's yet another opinion. Al yadei shahayasi pek bi'adol imchot b'sha'ol al nov v'lo michab. You may remember, if you've been with us a long, long time, through even the very beginning of Shmuel Aleph, when we were learning 1 Samuel, if you remember that, okay, let's see if we have a site here, otherwise I'll just tell you. Okay. If you remember, there was the horrific story in 1 Samuel, Shmuel Aleph, when Saul first started pursuing David to kill him. And most people in the country had no idea, because David was known to be very close to Saul. Saul gave his daughter Michal to David to be married. That's what people knew. He was the harpist in Saul's palace. Everybody understood he's close. But David knew he's got to run for his life, and Saul has turned on him. So David fled, and he ended up in the city of Nov, Nun Vav Bet, or N-O-B, a city of Kohanim, a city populated almost exclusively by Kohens, a holy city. And the Kohens welcomed him, and they had no idea that Saul was after him. And David asked them for food, and because he had to run, he couldn't bring food with him. And the Kohanim gave him food, and David asked for a weapon to protect himself. He didn't say, to protect myself from Saul. He said, you have weapons. Thanks for the food. You have weapons. And as you may recall, the Kohanim said this is a city of Kohens. We are a city of peace. We don't have any weapons. We're Kohens. We serve in the Holy Temple. It wasn't a Holy Temple, then it was a Mishkan. Temple only starts with Solomon. We don't have any weapons. David's asked, none at all. So I said, you know what? There is one weapon here. Now that you mention it, we have a little museum where we have an exhibit in your honor, honoring how you killed Goliath. And the museum exhibit has your sword that you used to cut off his head. I mean, it was your sword. It's the most popular exhibit in the museum, but if you want it, we'll give it to you. So they gave him the sword. Saul is following David, pursuing him, pursuing his path, hits the city of Nov, and there he learns that the Kohanim, the Kohens of Nov, provided food and succor to David, and even gave him a spear, a sword. And Saul, as a result of learning that, wiped out the city. He ordered the massacre of all the Kohanim in the city, and all but one were killed. And Doeg, the Edomite, was the one who did it, was the one who incited Saul. And Saul ordered his men to kill the Kohens, and nobody would do it. Not out of rebellion, nobody would do it. I just can't do that. We stand with you with loyalty. I can't do that. I remember I saw the movie Beckett, fabulous movie. Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole plays King Henry, and Richard Burton plays the key figure, Saint Thomas Becket or whatever. And for various reasons, the king eventually orders the assassination of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Becket. And we see nobody wants to do it. They're all loyal to the king. Nobody wants to kill. Nobody dares kill the Archbishop of Canterbury except for one guy. And that guy doesn't. So here was Saul in Nov, giving the order to kill the Kohanim, having trouble getting someone to do it. No one wanted to do it until finally Doeg said, I'll do it. And during that time, the rabbis say, Avner, his chief of staff, could have used the break, the moment, to assuage his feelings, calm him down, and talk him out of it. And he failed to do so. So there's an opinion that the reason God allowed for Avner to die in this way is that he failed to act. How did they put it? Let's take it back to the Hebrew for a second. And there are rabbis who say, Al Yadei Shahayasi Pek Biado, because Avner had the influence and authority, Limchot B'Shaol Al Nov, to talk out Shaul out of it before the death and murder of all the Kohens of Nov, below Micha. And he failed to use his influence to prevent that tragedy. So now we have that he incited Saul against David with the thing about the thorn, with the thing about the wells, and that he wrote that missive and put the names in the wrong order, and that he failed to prevent the massacre in Nov, and he could have done so, which teaches, by the way, the importance and urgency. The Jew has to speak up. You have to speak up. If you can save a life, if you can do righteousness, you can't just stand by lo ta'amod al dam riachai. We should not just stand idly by and decide that's not my problem. You're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it. And yet there's another opinion in Sanhedrin 28, Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, folio 28. Laman de Arma Micha, there is an opinion that Avner actually did protest. It's not in the text, but he did. That's an opinion. Well, if he did protest, so why do you say God allowed him to die prematurely? Memtet my tama ionish. So what's the reason he was punished? They got an onish. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Nachman says he heard from Rabbi Yitzchak that Avner's sin was she'shoha malchut beit David shtei shanim umechza, that because he sustained and held upright the house of Ish Boshet, the house of Saul, and did not immediately upon the death of Saul line up with everyone else and say, David's the new king, but continued to support and maintain the house of Saul and delayed David as sent to the throne for 2.5 more years. For that reason, that was a sin, because he delayed the kingdom of the house of David 2.5 years. For this, he lost his life, according to that midrash. So what we see from these different things is that he was a righteous person, but he was punished. And as an aside, they cite a very interesting way to look at this famous chapter 9 in Kohelet. Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, is where King Solomon later in his life starts to take stock on his life and starts to realize, when I was younger, I had a good time. I felt I'm young and have a good time. I'm rich as can be, king of Israel. Our country at that time is the strongest country in the whole world. They say about me, I'm the smartest guy that ever was, the wisest of all men. Every day the Navi says in the text, not a midrash, the Navi says, we'll learn it when we get to 1 Kings. He had the equivalent of a bar mitzvah every day, of a New York bar mitzvah every day. They had a big smorgasbord open to open to everybody. They had so much money, like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and these places. They had so much money that they had a daily, like a bar mitzvah, a catered smorgasbord for the whole city. The wealth was incredible. Malkat Shva, the queen of Sheba in Africa, had a desire in her lifetime to travel from the depths of Africa to Palestine, Israel, as the queen, to see who this guy is. I've heard about this guy. I can't believe there's such a person. And so famously, the Queen of Sheba, Malkat Shva, met him in Eretz Israel and visited for a few days just to encounter this giant of the world. So when he was young, that was his life. He married a lot of wives, more wives than the Torah permits a king. Even though the Torah permits a lot of wives, we've been watching David marrying one at a time. He's up to 7 where we left off. But for Solomon, he had more and more and more. And then later in his life, as he looks back, he writes Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes. And he begins to look back and realize it's not what I thought when I was younger. I thought there were things and insights that I was coming up with and that people were coming. There's nothing new under the sun. I thought what we're doing, there's never been before. Not so. The sun rises in the same place every day. It sets in the same place every day. There's nothing new under the sun. And that leads eventually to the very, very famous a time for this, a time for that. For everything, there was a season. Became a big, big song in, I think, the 60s. Was it the Turtles? I don't remember. But it was a big, big song. And by chapter 9, he further continues contemplating. And he starts saying, you know, even the strong people, not all strong people win the war over the weak. Not all the fast people win a race. It's not what people thought. It's not what people think. So that's this pasuk with which we're winding down now. He says, whatever it is in your power to do, again, he's towards the end of his life, whatever it is in your power to do it with all your might. It's actually what Jerry Seinfeld was telling the students of Duke yesterday, kind of a few days ago. That was basically his message to the 99% of people who cheered him. But there is no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom after life in the ground where you're going. So give everything your best shot while you're alive. I have further observed under the sun that the race is not won by the swift. I would have thought the fastest people win the race. Lola kalim hamerots, v'lola giborim hamilchama. And I would have thought that the strongest people win the wars. The race is not won by the swift, nor the battle by the strongest, nor is bread won by the wise, nor wealth by the intelligent. Now, we've seen that. We've seen plenty of people become wealthy, though they're not so bright, and plenty of bright people that don't quite make it financially, nor favor by the learned. For the time of mischance comes to all. Ki et fega yikra et kulan. And the Gemara picks up on those words. The race is not won by the swift, nor the battle by the strong. That Asael was the fastest of humans, and yet when he finally caught up to Avner, he was killed. And Avner outran him. And in the same way, the Gemara says, Avner was the strongest of men, and he was killed. And so, see how they put it? If I've got it right here, let's see, and if not, right? My dichtiv, 8 vafega yikre et kulam, and so on and so forth. Just see if I can find it real quick, or I may have just jumped by about a line or two, but that's the point they make, that the race is not won by the swift. The race is not won by the swift. That is Asael. As stated, Asael was swift of foot. Like a gazelle in the field, he was running out Avner, and Avner said to him, turn away, but he was too confident he could flee if necessary, as he was swift. What does it say? He refused to turn away, so Avner struck him in the belly with a backward thrust of the spear. And here's that other piece that I was just referring to, nor is the battle by the strong, and that is Avner, what we just learned tonight. What is written when he went to David? You took him aside within the gate to talk to him privately And there Yoav struck him in the belly. Thus, not the battle by the valiant. So in the end, here the strongest of men, he died. He was killed. With this, we finish our study of chapter 3. And God willing, next week, as we embark on the new Israel year, we go into chapter 4. You can peek ahead, 2 Samuel, Shmuel Bet, chapter 4, and we'll learn it with commentary, God willing, next week. Thanks so much for being here, and have a wonderful week, and a wonderful week celebration of Israel's birthday. Bye-bye.